Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Bass Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioKallisti.org. Remember to catch our exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional radio.
So, we just heard a track by a friend of mine named Johnny Hassel, and it's called Falling. And he was part of a duo. I gotta step back, actually. I worked with this guy and one of his other buddies. These guys are still my friends, but we worked together at this place called Encore Cafe like 20 years ago. And I remember they just played the most incredible music. And, you know, he was kind enough to loan me a tape. And it contained, you know, foundation level drum and bass. You know, the music that would shape my outlook on music for the rest of my life, pretty much. And so I didn't realize this at the time. You know, this just the tape. It had these sounds that I'd never heard would translate into, you know, a lifelong friendship with somebody who I actually look up to in a lot of ways. And lo and behold, he's managed to produce this fantastic dub techno track. And I think he found the vocal stem somewhere on YouTube and just threw it together. And I heard this and I was like, man, this is so good. This is like the sound of that room, that big room that you walk into and it's dark and all you see is silhouettes and fog and lasers, and but it just pounds, and but it's not like super aggressive.
Mm-hmm. It reminded me of that Dirty Vegas Days Go By track.
Yeah.
Obviously with female vocals, but I mean, it wasn't like a direct ripoff, but I think it gave that same.
Well, I think that's a
light, but it's like the mood is like somber, but it's not heavy, and there's like a lightness to it still, and it treads that mid ground between being light and dark in a way that I think it's open to interpretation enough that if somebody's having a good day, they'd probably hear it in a brighter tone, and if they're having a bad day, they'd hear it in a sadder tone, but both tones are valid.
Yeah, I think it just kind of landed in this really interesting sweet spot where it has this great drive, this great energy, but it's really chilled out, and I don't feel like it's making me bounce off walls, and that's kind of a good thing.
Yeah, there's not an aggressive air to it, and I think that's kind of where, you know, there's a difference between a fight riff and a fucking love ballad, and you know, it sounds obvious when you're describing them with words, but when you're hearing them, I don't think it's as easy to describe what's evoking those emotions in the first place, because it's not necessarily a formula. There's no real formula to making someone feel something from a sound, like from a track. There's like theory that suggests emotions can be formulaic, but I think those visceral responses that are just being evoked aren't the real emotions behind something like what you're experiencing when you hear this track. And that there's an element. How can you have something that you're hearing for the first time or experiencing for the first time evoke nostalgia?
Oh, that's a good question.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of where that's something that I think really good artists and musicians are able to do. It's like the first time you hear this track, there's nostalgia. Like, I don't have to know this guy to have that element of it, but there's certain things that he's doing with his composition to do that.
You know, I think it's like the brilliance of the genre in that there are these echoes that are out of time, and there are these very distinct moments where you don't, even though there's this steady pulse, you feel like time is slowing down. And it's not like it's slow. This isn't slow tempo music. Just because it's dubby and kind of minimal doesn't mean it's slow at all. It just feels like it's loose in time.
Well, I think that's one of those.
I think that's the power that's being tapped into.
Like the time dilation element is something that occurs with any sort of rhythmic steady that has 100% steady quantized rhythm. And this is where people can use that to their advantage by dividing the time and making more sounds in between the spaces rather than trying to layer them over each other. And this is where I think a lot of drum and bass sounds really chaotic, but it's really just filling in space a lot. On a lot more divided scale than most other genres. It just sounds...
I feel like it was Photek who did a linear drumming album where there was like one sound per step. I think a lot of guys actually did that. But I remember feeling like that was a really interesting approach to drumming because it's unnatural to drummers.
Right.
And then, of course, once we get a few generations into sampling of drum loops and of even of just other drum machines, and then into like second and third generation drum machines themselves and samplers, now we've got devices where you can add like randomness to the location when it actually lands on the step, or if it even plays at all. Like some drum machine samplers have like probability features, where you can say, I'm going to load this little clip, and it might play. It might play 14% of the time.
Right.
And that's enough to create this illusion of chaos, but it's actually a very deliberate setting. And that's the thing that always blew my mind about electronic music in general, and especially drum and bass, and a lot of the hardcore genres too, where they do a lot of crazy side chaining and cross modulation from other devices, but especially drum and bass, because it always seemed like there was this like heavy element of the marriage of samples and of synthesis, and it always felt like no matter how much someone tried to bring an organic acoustic origin instrument, it always was like it kind of fell back behind the synthesis.
Yeah, I think this is where some electronically created genres of music were really focused on trying to sound as if they were created by acoustic instruments, such as hip hop, sometimes pop music, but drum and bass very rarely tries to sound acoustic, and I think that's the beauty of it. But then what happens is when you try to recreate it with acoustic instruments, or trying to really make it sound as if it's created by acoustic, it doesn't feel as if it's drum and bass. It starts to feel more like jazz.
Or jazzy jungle.
I mean, even then...
But even jungle is
jungle feels more electronic, and that's kind of where what I'm getting at is what people are hearing when they're listening to drum and bass, and the really...
I'm really glad you mentioned the jazz
unique
connection.
Stuff is like they're hearing something that can only be produced electronically, because there's an element of all of the processing and channel switching and gate filters. All these things are part of the process to produce what they're hearing at the end.
What I've always loved about drum and bass is that if you listen to the same track on several different playback systems of varying quality and size, you'll hear every different kick drum that's being used, and they're all like extremely heavily processed. They're all sculpted with EQ and then compressed to a certain point, so it always occupies a certain level within its dominant range, and then they all cut off at like 80 hertz, it seems, or 75 hertz. There's like they're all low end limited because they have to translate and have that punch, and then that has to function as part of a side chain to some other, output down the line to some other compressor or gate, and it's going to influence the way some other sound is just being delivered.
Yep. And all those things are what come together to make that sound. In that,
I've seen some pretty ridiculous setups.
So here's what I'm getting at. You can't hear drum and bass without a subwoofer. Period.
No, you can't.
If you're listening to drum and bass without a subwoofer, you're not actually listening to drum and bass.
You're listening to drum and mid-range.
Yeah, so that's kind of
you
where...
might get the kick drum. You might get one of the kick drums if you're lucky.
Yeah, so then what ends up happening is when you hear and experience drum and bass the way it's supposed to be experienced with subwoofers, at least one, then that experience becomes something where it is completely unique in that the way that the bass is being delivered is unlike anything anybody's ever experienced before, because it's completely unique to drum and bass. There's nothing else on the face of the planet that's going to be delivering bass in the same regularity with the same intensity as drum and bass music. It's as if a lightning storm is sentient and communicating, and that's the only thing that could be comparable to drum and bass music. There's nothing else that would be
That's
comparable.
actually one of my favorite sounds of a rave, is when you're standing like 2/3 into the back of the room and it sounds like electricity is just trickling down the walls.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure on some level it's like a speaker frying or slowly, or like a crossover point that's like revealing itself at that location in the room, because none of those rooms were treated.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of explanations for why it could happen, but I noticed it the most with drum and bass. It was
Well,
just like,
and I've been thinking about it, and one of the reasons you probably notice it is because the only way for drum and bass to exist is with a shitload of power.
Yeah.
And transistors and transformers and amplifiers. It's the only way drum and bass can happen.
Yeah.
It's basically like a small power.
it's a heat sink.
Yeah.
It translates heat into acoustic energy. And
that's all it is at the end of the day. And then when you realize, for the systems to get you that feeling, how much power modification is actually taking place, that's what drum and bass is. It's power modification. It's electricity modification. I mean, not all music is that, but drum and bass specifically is completely dependent upon that.
There's probably an idealized ratio of power to the size of a room.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all extremely important factors too, because when drum and bass was really happening, it wasn't in studios. Like, we weren't listening in studios. I'm sure people were making it in studios, but it was in warehouses and
gigantic spaces. Just fucking
huge
gigantic
spaces.
And the spaces would not be able to contain the sound, and you'd be able to hear it for miles around.
Oh,
so it's like, I mean, those spaces weren't intended to be soundproof.
No, they were just to contain
But when
the
you
light.
realize how far the sound would radiate outside of those spaces, then it's, then you start to understand the scale of power that's actually being converted into this sonic experience. Because that's where, again, there's nothing...
I remember standing, 60, 70, 80, 100 feet away from the main stage at some points, and just having experienced this incredible sound, because it's so big. I'm sure that the ceiling height played some kind of role in comb filtering and making all those weird extra noises that I don't hear in a lot of recordings anymore.
Yeah.
And when I go back and listen to the old recordings, like the vinyl transfers, no matter how good they are, no matter how high a bit rate they are, or even if they're like a full wave, there's this quality that's missing, because I don't have a warehouse and 50 to 100,000 watts of power and a wall of speakers.
Yeah, and in that, I think there's still obviously festivals and shit like that happening, but
there are actually, I was one of my buddies, he wants to build a dub style sound system, and he sent me a bunch of links at one point and showed me that there are sound tribes in the Midwest that roll around with their box trucks loaded full of giant speaker systems.
Yeah.
And sound clash is a thing, and selectors still yell at each other. That's like a ear protection mandatory type event, though, because those are really efficient cabinets designs that are used,
Yeah.
and they're using a lot of power, and the music is designed to take advantage of those kind of systems too. So
yeah, it's been, I feel like people should at least go to one of those shows in their lifetime just to understand what bass is meant. Bass in its peak experience is meant to be felt like, because then it's like, it's medicine, it's therapeutic. Because I think we've discussed it multiple times in that music is meant to be, well, was meant to be medicinal in the early Western context, but even in the modern context, you have people doing light therapy and sonic therapy and all these types of different manipulations of matter via frequency modulation. But what the easiest way to explain it is when people discuss the notion of vibes, a sound system puts everybody on the same vibe or the same wave or the same frequency. It forces everyone on the same frequency.
I think that's where the saying like get on the, like, we're on the same wavelength comes from.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of those things, people discuss it in terms of modern parlance as if there's no root of the saying, as if it's just a metaphor. But again, when everybody's dancing at the same time, they don't have to be doing the same dance. Everybody's on the same wavelength, whether they like it or not. I mean, but of course they like it because that's the reason they're there. But this is what I'm getting at in that,
I do remember seeing people with a grumpy face at raves.
Right.
Like they didn't want to be there, but didn't have anywhere else to go.
Yeah. There's always those people in that they're grumpy because it's like they're being forced. Okay, say you don't like drum and bass, you're being forced on the drum and bass wavelength, whether you like it or not now. So then you're like, okay, I don't like this. So even though I don't like this, I'm still forced to be on this. So I'm going to sit here with a grumpy face. And this is... It's everybody's reaction is not always the same, but the issue is it's going to force you on that wavelength. And this is kind of where the people who we recognize as the best dancers are just representing those waves in real time most accurately in a way that the audience agrees upon. Because the issue is, if you're dancing and it's not on beat, it's not in line with what's happening, people are going to laugh at it or just ignore it. But then when you have somebody who's dancing on beat, in line with the frequencies, then people are enamored by it and can't look away. So it's this element of what's happening with these actions and interplay between sound and visuals. It's like, oh, this is like, okay, if you have dances that are specific movements that people will say, oh, the Dougie, flossing, the nay, whatever. You have all these specific movements that then you can apply in any situation once you learn them. But if they don't fit, it's still gonna look off, and that's kind of where there's like all these things about what's happening with the sound has to work with what you're doing in a dance.
Sure.
in order for it to work.
Well, I think that's part of the magic or the synergy when you have the right size space with enough sound, and it's the right sound, and you get everyone moving. And there's a lot of credit given to, we want to give a lot of the credit to the DJ for being able to read the crowd and give them what they want to hear and to help guide them through this vibe. But there's also this huge component of like the sound system and the room. I've been to so many clubs where they spent so much extra effort trying to make it look good, but they didn't pay any attention to the way it sounded. And so there are spots that were dead, or the clubs would just be too damn loud. And then so that's just like an issue of a poorly tuned space.
Yeah.
And that always killed it for me. It was like, it sounds terrible. Can't find anywhere where it sounds right. Have to yell at my friends to talk to them. Nobody wants to yell at their friends.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what, as you get older, the less you want to be in that situation where you can be the one in control of the volume and the music with your friends sitting in a space where you don't have to yell at each other. And it's like, I think the less, most of our friends have sound systems enough that if we wanted to throw a rave at any one of their places, it would be loud enough that it would work for a small party. And that's kind of where, when you can do that, you have less desire to go out and pay an exorbitant amount for it, in that, if a DJ is doing a set live, unless you actually meet them and shake hands with them, or talk with them or some shit, there's not a huge difference at that point. And I think this is where there's the reality of performance. I love going to performances in that it's interesting to experience the music, but the reality is, unless, like I said, unless you get to interact with that person, or unless their live performance has a huge difference than their studio performance, which a lot, sometimes they do, but sometimes it's the exact same shit, then it's like, you might as well just listen to your shit at home.
There's also the times where their live performances are reflected very accurately in studio performances. And I'm thinking of guys like James Zabila, pretty much. He's like the only person I can actually think of who, when I heard him live, his live performance did all the things that I had expected from his studio work, but there was more to it, because I was in a room that had the sound was right, and the space was the right size, and there were enough people to fill it up so that it didn't sound like it was empty.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of factors that improved it. Maybe that's like the wrong example. He's like a super performer who does crazy integrations of technology. So,
well, but that's just like most rap is just trash live because the vocals are never EQ'd correct,
or because they get too hyped and start yelling.
Well, but that's part of it. But the issue is because usually the bass is so loud that all you can hear is and then eventually or occasionally like the yelling coming through, and it's like most rap concerts are just terribly EQ'd, and it's not a good experience. So that's kind of where I don't even like going to rap or hip hop shows for the most part, especially the underground ones. Like, they just do not have good sound people most of the time, and it's just painful. As a sound person, I can't do it. I don't, I try to do it for the cause, but then there's this element of it's just too painful, and then I feel like if I'm supporting people just putting out trash, then that I'm helping make things worse. If they're talking about some dumbass shit and I'm fucking going and supporting that, then I'm supporting dumbass shit, so I can't do that.
No, I understand that completely. It's one thing to provide a platform for people who don't have a platform and who are making something that's interesting, and then, but there's no need to And the internet exists. If we can find YouTube, then so can other people.
Yeah. Well, but you know what I then realized is also rapping about non-hood rat shit is boring as fuck. There's this element of, you know, you go listen to a rap song about a guy that's monogamous and taking care of his kids, and his kids are getting straight A's. You're gonna want to turn that shit off immediately. Nobody wants to hear a song about somebody that's doing awesome in that way, and you don't realize it until you hear a song that's like that, and then you're like, oh my god, this is terrible in a different kind of way. You know, it's weird. And I'm not trying to shit on positive rappers. It's more so, you know, Will Smith doesn't do that in his, well, he did in that Just the Two of Us. But that's why people shat on that song. I mean, it was a good song, but it was a remake. Anyway,
I think Will Smith's an incredible talent. Mm-hmm. He's actually one of my favorite actors.
Yeah,
because like, even what was that? There was like one sci-fi movie that was just trashed in the media. And it was like him and his son, they were in it. Jaden Smith has to, you know, travel across some weird planet without getting killed.
Yeah, I still haven't seen it. I probably should watch it.
And, you know, there were some glaring failures of the visual storytelling. Mm-hmm. But it was also a beautiful render. It was fantastic, like the way they envisioned it. And when I thought more about the way, you know, even Will Smith I think he got criticized for having this kind of like, it's like watching a piece of bread act kind of situation. Yeah. And they're like, man, we expect more from you.
Well,
but no, hear me out. And like the way that the story works out, the way that they give the backstory for how humanity survives, it actually kind of makes sense that he would be like that.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of things that, unfortunately, it's not a sugar sweet candy consumable science fiction story. It's a very complex science fiction story that required me watching it more than once, which was really weird because the second time through it occurred to me that they were doing their best job to tell a story and imagine a version of humanity that doesn't exist and that hasn't existed, that hasn't had to exist. And that's actually kind of impressive. And so it's like it's tough. Like I read things about, you know, criticisms of Will Smith and his decisions, but I feel like he has an incredible you know, spectrum of roles.
So this is what I was going to get at with him specifically, and I think it's good that you expanded that, because when you have somebody like Will Smith, I think what people like about Will Smith is his perceived personality and charisma that he exudes through the camera. Now, not everybody has this, and there's people like Tom Cruise. Who else? I think society mostly gives this quality to men, because it forces it, or it projects it upon them. So okay, let me think. Oprah is one. I'm trying to think who else. Like any of the royal family from a Brit is one. There's this air of this person can do no wrong. They could literally be eating a saltine cracker, and that person would be giving the best performance of what it means to be eating a saltine cracker in their fans' minds.
Good show.
Because their charisma it's a drug. It's something that is so enthralling that people will cast aside any logic when they're looking upon this person's works, or anything that this person is doing. This person could be fucking beating up a homeless person, and they'd be like, well, we gotta understand what they're trying to say when they're beating up this homeless person, because this is what society's doing to the homeless person. And this is like, you know, this is how you get these people who end up actually doing wrong and having these people defend them. But then, okay, you look at somebody like Jaden Smith, the kid's out feeding people for free, giving people like love meals, doing shit that is obviously good for society. And it's a matter of, I don't think there's anybody who, if you go and look at all of the shit that giving water purifiers to Flint, they put a shitload of water, like if you go look at the things that this kid, he's like 20 something, this young man has done, it's unequivocally good. Nobody can dispute that.
No, that's why it's amusing that there are even criticisms at all. It's
right,
like,
exactly.
It's like such a trivial thing.
But what I was getting at is, because now Will Smith has hit this level of having so many people who recognize this quality in him, and he hasn't fucked it up, then you get the counter people who just want to shit on him, shit on his kids, shit on his legacy because he has this now. It's not just him. This is the natural human counter.
Yeah, but I mean, what are they gonna do? Complain that he wore like purple Pumas on a Thursday or something?
They'll complain that he fucking woke up. They'll complain that he took a breath of air and exhaled.
Will Smith, we all love you. Straight up. Keep doing what you're doing, because he makes some of the best movies.
I mean, there's people out there who will... What has that dude ever done that is wrong? I mean, we're at a time where everything is pretty much public. This dude has literally done no wrong, man.
He turned down the role of Neo.
Yeah, that's the most wrong he's done in his life. Right?
Straight up the most wrong.
When you have such a public figure, we're gonna find out every fucking thing Will Smith has done in his life. Every goddamn thing. This dude has never done a wrong thing. I mean, obviously he's done something that would be considered...
He was a teenager once.
Right, exactly.
We were all
But what I'm saying is, he's never done anything that's bad enough for people to wag a finger at him.
Yeah.
You can't even wag a finger at that dude. And this is like, when you have to look at somebody and acknowledge that, then of course there's going to be people who want to fucking destroy his legacy.
No, I mean, you really can wag the finger about turning down the role of Neo. But you have to wink and smile.
Only retrospectively.
Well,
because here, let me pitch Matrix to you. There's this movie we're going to do. It's about a bunch of people in leather, but the leather is actually not the real world, and it's actually this fake world where they're plugged into machines, and everybody's poor and they're eating grits all the time.
But they can do kung fu.
But not in the real world. Only when they're wearing leather. It's kind of BDSM, kind of. We're not going to show any sex because we're trying to get the PG-13 rating.
But we'll stick this needle in the back of their head several times.
No, there's no drugs. There's no overt drug usage. Yeah. But there's a lot of leather.
A lot of leather.
Whole lot of leather.
And guns.
We got flip phones. How about that, Will Smith? How does that sound? I'd fucking turn that shit down too. If the Matrix hadn't come out yet and somebody's coming to me with some fucking BDSM fantasy that's like a ripoff of Ghost in the Shell, I'm saying that's a ripoff of Ghost in the Shell, ain't it? And they're like, well, kind of, but we're doing it live action.
Yeah, when you put it like that, Matrix doesn't really...
It doesn't sell. Like, when you're Will Smith, you're taking the movie with fucking...
Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah, over that shit.
Yeah. Men in Black is an exceptionally successful franchise.
Yeah.
It sprouted off its own secondary version with Thor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Thor's in it.
And Valkyrie.
Yeah, I mean, what the... Well, I guess that's what happens when you have chemistry with somebody on screen.
Well, and this is where Tessa Thompson is, she's like an undeniable talent in that when she was in Creed, she wrote songs for that shit, and that's kind of where when you have somebody who's in a movie and writing music for it, and
Well, that's like next level shit right there.
yeah, and it was good music.
Yeah.
But I think also that's where you have somebody like then okay, Chris Hemsworth, for example. I think he's another example of he's still early on in his career, but he's gonna end up in that same shit as Will Smith eventually.
Yeah.
As long as he just doesn't fuck up, you know, eventually there's gonna be statues of that dude in Australia.
If there aren't already.
If there aren't already. You know? They're gonna build statues for that dude. Not Russell Crowe. Not him. But they're gonna build statues for Chris Hemsworth.
I feel like the way that the world is going, Ozzy Man is gonna get his statue before Russell Crowe. No, I mean he's one of the most incredible ambassadors.
Yeah. I mean,
he's also hilarious.
But what does he look like?
That's a good question.
How can you build a statue of somebody you don't know what they look like?
He looks like a dude who has a beard and some kind of shaggy-ish long hair, and a baseball cap, t-shirt.
Everybody knows who Thor is. Everybody knows who Russell Crowe is. I mean, I'm sure there's people who know what Ozzy Man looks like, but they're probably like his mom and his sister and like his girlfriend.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at in this fame element of people can be pushed into fame, and then there's people who become famous because there's this quality that people see and project onto them that may or may not be there. And I think their stint in fame is people trying to validate it or not. So you have somebody like Kevin Hart. He constantly fucks up now. So I think the only thing that's saving him is the fact that he's actually a charismatic person.
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole lot of things that people look at him now and are like, those are not redeeming qualities. He's done some shit where, you know, it just makes him look bad. But the only thing that's keeping him around is that, you know, I think, okay, so, like, Aziz Ansari,
yeah.
Where's he at? Is he back? Because, like, I'm looking at this in that when he got
there's a big wave of Netflix. I feel like it's just a big wave of Netflix content that appeared overnight, and he was a part of that. And I'm not really big on comedians. Like I'll go to the local the Comedy Attic in Bloomington because they get comedians. It's a comedy shop, and that's cool. But I'm not like really into sitting down and watching a comedian on my TV. And so I kind of ignored all that stuff. I didn't pay attention to it. And then I remember reading that he was embroiled in some kind of scandal about some kind of sexual harassment scandal.
Yeah, it's very.
And it was like, what's going on? From Netflix to this, it was very strange. I wouldn't even know if I don't even watch Netflix anymore. I got really kind of just tired of the same suggestions, and even their production cycle. It's fast. It's really fast.
Yeah.
But there was just something about it. I couldn't do it anymore. I'm gonna wait for my Amazon Prime subscription to come to an end because I don't even watch content on Amazon anymore.
Yeah, there's too much content.
Yeah, I've managed to get all, pretty streamlined. I might watch a movie occasionally. I haven't really been watching television. I listen to internet radio. And I think and of course I go to YouTube when I want to, surf, because I feel like YouTube has kind of nailed the whole visual audio surfing experience for me. But when you're built into Google's search engine, it's kind of hard not to be able to come up with suggestions.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's just this, I think we're hitting this peak content phase of
there's just so much content.
Everything's been done. It's really hard to find a new story. Witcher is just, that's a book that's, 30 years old at this point.
Yeah.
So it's not new at all.
Yeah. Well,
it's just new to TV.
I saw a new variation. Well, not new. It's from like 2015, I think. I can't even remember what it was called, but it was a variation on Pygmalion. And most people know Pygmalion as My Fair Lady, and a lot of people know it as Pretty Woman. I think most people know it as Pretty Woman. But that's one of those things that there are only so many ways to tell that story before it just gets run into the ground, I think. I think if people were aware that story is as old as time, like, that's pretty much as old as it gets. I feel like it would provide a better framework for historical reference when we're talking about that kind of, like, boy meets girl or boy creates idealized woman scenario. And I realize now when I say it like that, it's actually kind of fucked up.
I mean, that's kind of like the Bible ripping off Gilgamesh,
Yeah.
Just straight ripped it off.
I worked with a guy once. He's a piano tuner, and me and one of the other my coworkers at the music store were talking about something. He's like, "What? Well, that's just Gilgamesh. Haven't you read anything?" And it's like, holy crap, he's right.
Yeah, Gilgamesh has so many tropes that have been just, redone over time so many times.
Gilgamesh is like a template for all of the Avengers movies.
Right, basically. Yeah. Basically. What's that dude's name? I forget the guy's name that's made out of dirt. But yeah, it's like he's got the villain and they reconcile. Yeah.
I think I've read that there's something only like 5 or something actual stories, and the rest are just variations on those themes in Western literature. And there might be only 5 themes in like Eastern literature as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. It's it's not a whole lot of nuance to humans as much as we like to think. But you observe the same kind of conflicts in animals. Like, I saw a chipmunk and a dove get into a fight this morning. It's like that shit happens all the time where they're trying to defend their territory. And,
we've had some crazy weather here. So in Indiana, we've had this like shift of cold, like freezing cold, freeze the ground cold, so it's hard as a rock. And then past couple of days it's been warm enough to thaw just the first couple inches. And
it was
then
warmer in Bloomington than it was in Houston yesterday.
Really?
Yeah, about 9 degrees.
Man. So somebody definitely left the heat on and all the windows open or something. Because what ended up happening is I still think it's a typo. We looked at the Weather Channel, and it said aerial flooding. Like with an L.
Yeah.
Area L. And I thought, well, surely that's a typo. Then we look it up, and sure enough, it's actually a condition where it discusses like rain not being absorbed into the ground and creating flood-like conditions.
Yep.
And so, I live on a corner, and on top of a hill, and people crest the hill going in excess of the posted speed limit pretty regularly. And so in the last month, I have had to call 911 4 times because I watched, 2 of the 3 times I was actually like at my plants looking at the intersection when it happened. And then the other 2 times I was staring at the computer, and it happened as they drive by my house. And one time they almost hit a power pole.
Wow.
So I'm not saying that I live in like a dangerous place, but in the last month I've had to call 911 4 times. And it just blows my mind how secure people must feel in their vehicles.
Oh yeah.
When it's wet and
people are stupid,
and
man.
declining temperature, rapidly declining temperature, and as it gets cold, the rubber in tires loses its ability to adhere to the road, and it's a slow. It's probably some kind of logarithm, and as it gets to a finite temperature, it just drops off completely, and you might as well have a piece of ice. But I see this, and I hear it all the time, where I hear skidding tire noise and then a honking sound. It's like, wait, who's honking? And why are they honking? Because they're afraid? Is it like when a squid inks and swims off? Is that what the honk is?
Well, I wonder if they're trying to warn people that they're coming over the hill, that they're like out of line or something. Because I've always wondered, when you're going over a hill, sometimes people will look away from their steering wheels, and that always freaks me out, because I don't trust people to keep their eye on the road and stay in their lane.
Yeah.
So maybe they're trying to honk and warn people like, hey, I'm out of my lane or some shit. Pay attention.
No, these people are like,
I don't know.
They pull right up onto the back of people's cars and just lay on the horn.
Oh, yeah, those people are assholes. It's funny because I hate being behind people that are going slow, but even then I don't honk, because you never know who's in the fucking car in front of you. It could be like your mom. I mean, if you don't, obviously your mom's car, but
they might have a fresh crock pot full of soup that they're taking to their sick friend's house, or their sick mom, or their sick, somebody.
But then if people make stupid, dumbass moves that could have caused accidents, that's when I honk, because, there's times when people will like stop before they're turning. They'll come to a complete stop and then start turning, and that's where I'm like, you're gonna cause an accident one day doing this, and that's kind of there's some weird shit that Indiana drivers do consistently that I'm wondering, like stop slamming on the brakes on yellow lights. Like, yellow light means fucking caution, not stop. And then, I mean, it's not just Indiana, but you get these people who will like slam on their brakes on yellow. It's a fucking they're supposed to be 5 seconds. Most of the time they're 4.5. But yellow lights are not short.
I think in Indianapolis the yellow lights are exceptionally long.
Yeah, I think they are. I think they might be like 6 seconds sometimes. Yeah. But that's, you're not allowed to speed up, but if you can make it, you don't have to slow down, and you don't have to slam on your brakes if it's fucking yellow. That's the law. You just can't speed up. You can't switch lanes in an intersection. There's laws about getting through an intersection. You can't go through a parking lot to bypass an intersection either. Yeah, that's reckless driving. Yeah. Exactly. I do that shit all the time, but I know it's illegal. Well, you only have to be held up to a higher ethical standard when you're, Well, I only do it because people at this certain corner will get in the right lane when they're not turning. They think at fucking 3rd and P. Ellis next to the KFC, and there's like a cut through right at that stoplight, and I'm like, if these fucking people would just get into the left lane, it wouldn't be a problem. But it's more so, people are very unaware of how their actions affect people around them. So it's like, if I'm going straight and there's 2 lanes and the right lane is a turn lane, I'd get into the left lane if I'm not turning right. So if other people need to go right, they can go. But everybody's not that aware of other people. They don't fucking care about other people. And that's where it's not a whole lot of time. It's just a matter of awareness of other people. Because my thing is, if somebody doesn't have emergency lights, they can't just blow through stoplights or some shit. So I'm effectively, everybody who's behind me is at my whim.
Yeah.
So I don't want anybody behind me blaming me if they're in some, rush and they got to get to work or some shit like that. I mean, I don't want to be responsible for it. I don't want to be that person that's holding somebody else's life up because I want to take my fucking time. And that's like, it's fine if you have 3-lane roads, but a lot of these roads are 1 lane. So you end up, sometimes, people don't even go the speed limit. And that's where I'm, like, it's great. You don't have anywhere to be. You're fucking, you can take extra time out of your day. But I don't think everybody's living like that, So that's kind of, it's weird to me that speed limit as a recommendation is obviously for the safety.
Well, I think it's to assign liability.
That
too.
But it's
what's going
at
on.
the same time, if you're like going through a curved area, they'll drop the speed limit because they don't want you to fucking go off the road, and most cars can't handle those. A lot of these corners at high speed, so it's like, in many cases, I'm looking at the speed limit like, okay, I may need to drop my speed so I don't fucking flip off the road, and that's where I'm like, I'm not gonna go 100 miles an hour through a fucking 90-degree curve, like. That's just stupid.
Yeah,
and exactly. So, to me, there is an element of the speed limit is giving me situational awareness to know, how if I'm coming up on some shit that I need to really pay attention to. But then, let's assume that the speed limit is there for that reason. I'm not trying to die. I want to get to my fucking destination. So the idea that I can get in trouble for breaking this fucking speed limit, it's like this, I don't even know what that.
So the history of speed limits in America is actually really kind of messed up. I think in the 50s, the Air Force did this longitudinal study of miles traveled with loads and over distances and then over varying distances, and it turns out that there is an average rate of speed that can optimize traffic flow for a given density of travelers.
Yep.
And that's typically 30 miles an hour in town. And they find that short of traveling, 1.5 times the rate of speed, you don't actually save much more than about 10 seconds per mile.
But it's because of other people.
Because of other people.
Yep.
Because there are other vehicles on the road.
Yep. And this is why I'm getting back to 1-lane road.
Yeah.
That's because they're doing these tests on fucking 1-lane roads.
Back in the 50s.
Yeah, of course.
And so vehicles back then weren't safe either. They didn't have the same kind of capabilities to accelerate or decelerate or protect their occupants the way that vehicles do now. And tire technology wasn't as good. Our tires can hold on to wet roads pretty much down to 40 degrees. Mm-hmm. And unless you hit uneven road surfaces or hit some kind of debris, the tires grip. They hold on really well. There's this they can hold, most tires are capable of holding up to 7/10 of the gravity. 70% of the vehicle's weight traveling around a curve or around a circle. Some can handle more. Some tires can handle close to 1 G of lateral acceleration before they start to let go. I mean, that's incredible because vehicles weigh, thousands of pounds of metal being held onto the ground by 4 patches of rubber. Mm-hmm. So we've got incredible ability to keep the vehicles on the road. It's just at a point there are so many variables, like declining temperature. Not everyone has brand new tires. Not everyone has the same type of tires, or the budget for that even. some people change their tires on different intervals. Some people don't. Some people don't realize that their vehicle is out of alignment and presents some kind of safety concern because its emergency handling characteristics have been completely thrown off.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of things that I think are an influence on maintaining a lower speed limit now that we have one. And I've read a lot of compelling arguments for raising the speed limit because there's this often touted 80th or 85th percentile where that's like where the speed that 85% of traffic travels at is the safest. And anything in excess is obvious because they're traveling too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And anything slow is actually an outlier because most people don't travel too slow. It's like it's a lot lower than we think. It's like the remaining 15% is divided up between people who drive slow and people who drive too fast.
Is the live stream on?
Should be. Huh, these bastards made me press. Now we're live.
Huh.
Well, we were on RadioKallisti for the last hour, and we're now going to initiate our YouTube stream.
Exceptional radio.
Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioKallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional radio.
Okay, so what happened is today I got this notification from YouTube saying that I had to update our stream settings to, because we don't have a kid-friendly show because we curse and we talk about more mature themes. And so I had to create a new stream, and I had to use their Streamlab or whatever their Go Live situation is, their new interface. And I thought that I had scheduled something. So I apologize. I thought that I had done something that didn't actually happen. Now I know.
Yeah, they keep every time I log on, they keep asking to upgrade or update that child shit. And it's like, man, I've already done this.
Yeah,
Tien's already done this.
I do this like every week. I'm tired of it. And then they gave me 2 notifications. It's like, seriously, 2?
It's like, people fucking pay attention to your kids. It's not our job. Make sure they're not listening to this shit.
Seriously.
Stop fucking up our
I don't know
interface.
if their kids understand what we're talking about, then...
They're woke.
Yeah.
Woke ass kids. If you're 7 and listen to this, congratulations.
Seriously.
You're fucking reincarnated or some shit.
Straight up. That means you understand, like, wormhole physics and can probably explain it to your parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you-
7-year-olds listen to this shit.
If 7-year-olds have found our show, though, that's kind of messed up.
Yeah. That's YouTube's fault.
That's YouTube's fault. Yeah, it's totally
Yeah.
YouTube's fault. How did their algorithm point us to the wrong people?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I've been looking at how things have been recommended, and there's so little organic exposure to things that the idea of having organic exposure is almost a lie in itself, because everything is so constructed behind a paywall that you don't even know is necessary. Well, it's the paywall from the advertiser side.
I can't give our channel the correct name. I can't call it Exceptional Randos, the URL.
Mm-hmm.
I can't make it YouTube channel Exceptional Randos or YouTube channel Bex Walter Group, because they have disabled that function for the time being for some reason. but there's no clear explanation for why. There's just a link that tells you how to get it done. When you press the link to do it, it takes you back to this thing that says it's not happening right now. And if for more information, click this link, and it takes you to the link that tells you all the information that takes you to. So it takes you to this like an cyclic redundancy loop thing.
Yeah. I swear there's an element of, you know how capitalism is like, it's the best system on the planet?
God,
nothing ever fucking works, man. I'm trying to figure out, when does shit work in capitalism? You get these windows of uptime, but most of the, it's like, try fucking going through Chicago O'Hare on time. It doesn't happen.
No,
it doesn't happen.
Every time that I've left O'Hare on time. I've only ever left on time. The few times that I've had to connect through O'Hare, I've always ended up having...
How long were you sitting on the fucking tarmac before your plane took off? Because that shit doesn't, like... Planes at O'Hare never take off.
It was an international connecting flight. It was like on the...
the international has their own...
Yeah, they have their own runway. The few times...
If it's domestic...
The few times that I've had to
O'Hare.
connect through O'Hare domestically, I've always had like an extra hour to kill, and I always make the foolish mistake of eating something, and then I'm like, 20,000, 30,000 feet in the air, and then all of a sudden my gut's like burble. And then, there are a lot of things that are going on inside of an airplane. It's pressurized. Yeah. You're way high up in the air.
I try to never eat before flights.
Yeah, well...
Just for that reason. I don't want to be on the air, on the plane.
I'm a sucker for seared MSG. Like, when I smell that, like, I know it's in the air. It's like, I better do it.
Nah, in fact, I try to cut off my food almost like 11 p.m. the night before a flight.
Yeah, well, that's probably really smart, so you don't get sick at all.
Yeah. I haven't gotten sick traveling in over 3 years because I think it boosts your immune system too.
I've been reading about so keto is out, apparently.
Of course.
It's like, truly, it's being declared a fad diet. And it works for some people, but the percentage of people that it works for apparently is a small percentage. It's not advisable. You have to have, like, there are some legitimate, like, health reasons why one would have to do something like that. But that's a very specific group of people who have very specific dietary requirements. But the new one is it's like a temporary fast. So you have like a 6-hour window every day where you can eat, and for the remaining 18 hours of the day you don't eat. So there's 10 waking hours where you don't eat.
Yep.
And you can't spread the 6 hours out. You got 6 hours to get it in there. Intermittent fasting, that's what it's called.
Yeah, AKA Ramadan.
Oh man, Ramadan for a year.
Yeah, basically. That's what's so funny about it, because then you're looking at it. I mean, I'm looking at it in the sense of there's all these dietary things built into religious ideologies where I wonder how much cancer was prevented because of Ramadan. In the sense of, it's proven that intermittent fasting actually causes cancer to, like, I think it goes into phagocytosis or some shit, and it's like, starts eating itself. So because it's not getting fed any new sugars or something. So there's all these elements of, fasting kicks your immune system in. It reduces inflammation. It, potentially reduces the spread of cancer.
So about 6 months ago, I think, maybe a little bit longer, I read about a French study. It was like a 20-year study where they were tracking diet and dietary intake of their subjects. And they found that over time, people were able to maintain their body mass and musculature and fat percentage and just remain healthy actually got healthier.
Yeah.
And they started to eat less and less and less per year. Their caloric intake started to drop.
Yep, because their metabolism.
Because their metabolism started to slow down. But then it also turns out that part of that whole thing is that as this process works out, people naturally move towards this consolidated time where they get most of their nutrients. And there might be some snacking, afterwards, but not very much.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is actually like a human behavior.
Yeah,
that we
eating 3 times
we're not allowed to experience on our own because we're being marketed this whole
3 meal a day
schedule bullshit. Yeah.
And the idea of eating that many times a day is fucking absurd. Because just the issue is if you are actually preparing your own food, that's going to take so much time that then you're like, oh, if I need to eat 3 times a day, then I need to get fast food. So this is where that schedule then forces people into this unnatural cycle of consumption, and that's where it starts to create these digestive problems. You have people who can't shit on proper schedules because they're eating fucking so many times a day that their digestive system never has a chance to catch up. You get the fucking diverticulitis because people just have eaten so much meat that it builds up and it can't get through their intestines and starts seeping out, and it's like fasting solves so many problems because it
triggers immune system response.
It gives your body a chance to catch up from this bullshit that we've been told. Because I'm like, if a snake can, it's not that a snake can't. If a snake wanted to, could eat every fucking day, but really, they're like, okay, I want to eat the least amount possible to conserve my energy, so I'm going to eat once a month. If that's all it takes, I'll eat once a month. Why are we looking at it from this point of we need to consume the most possible when if we consume the least possible, we could still maintain, but then we're also not going over, and there's no way to get to excess if you consume the least possible.
So
you can't get obese consuming the least possible. There's just no way to do it.
Recently, the current presidential administration passed off signed new policy into action that lowered the requirements for pork. It allows for more contaminants basically, and a lot of this is due to a pork shortage. Because lo and behold, the Chinese love pork. They eat pork. A lot of the foods that are made in China contain pork.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also bat flu in China now. No, this is on track. Like I remember reading the CDC. When Ebola finally landed in America, they were trying to figure out the possible pathogen vectors, and it was fairly widely agreed upon that it was bats that are the actual pathogen vector for Ebola. And it's partially due to the fact that they contain so many competing pathogens, like all these like viruses that on their own are like unbelievably deadly, but for whatever reason, because they all are working against and with each other to kill the bat. The bat's just like, hey, you guys fight it out and let me know what you decide. And then it lives long enough to distribute fucking Ebola, right? So the next generation of flu, we just got, or the last generation of flu, we had swine flu and avian flu and
H1N1,
all the H number, letter number combinations. And so I remember reading that, bat flu. SARS. Yeah, well, bat flu is the next generation of flu. It's being delivered by bats, and it's really kind of terrifying what that actually means, because if they're delivering influenza, which will already compromise an immune system, all of a sudden they're pathogen reservoirs in a sense, can unleash who knows what. Someone will get sick, and it's like, what happens? Like, oh, we came in contact with guano. Test him for everything. That's what it's going to end up being. And also, these things seem somehow like resistant to treatment, of course.
Yeah.
Because they're coming out of fucking bats. But anyways, because there's a pork shortage,
bat flu.
And we got bat flu. Bat flu just sounds badass, actually, when I hear it out loud. Fucking bat flu. That's what Batman gets.
Right.
Bat flu. Well, anyway, so because there's a pork shortage, Impossible has advanced their pork program.
Nice.
And so they are doing big testing in China. And so pretty soon we're going to get, Impossible pork dumplings and all the Impossible variation of all the dim sum and
I'm down.
all that and the testing positively from what I've read. The people in China are like, hey, it tastes really good. It's not pork. Oh, you could have fooled me.
Nice.
And unlike people who are eating fucking Whoppers and pissing off moms who think the word damn is
I saw that,
Impossible is being more cautious and reserved with the Chinese market. So
well, I haven't eaten meat in 2 weeks, and there's so many meat alternatives that I haven't missed it. I had fucking a pesto meatball sub last night, but it was fucking vegan meatballs.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, I consider myself a meat eater. When I can go 2 weeks without eating meat and not miss it, anybody can. But my thing is, I'm not trying to force people to eat impossible foods. It's just a matter of, I see people fighting it as if, Impossible is gonna give you man boobs because the estrogen. Like, motherfucker, you already had titties. Like, all these people who complaining about estrogen, they already had titties. Like, those dudes had man boobs.
My understanding of it is that
it's bullshit. It's not the same type of estrogen.
First, it's not the same type of estrogen, but one patty contains something like 0.3 milligrams or micrograms of estrogen, something really small.
Yeah. But it's like phytoestrogen, or I forget the...
But the amount of estrogen that's used with hormone therapy is like 1,000 times more than that, or something like that.
Right. But these are the same people who don't want to acknowledge trans fucking sexuals.
You'd have to eat
transgender people.
You'd have to eat an entire Impossible cow, like the whole thing.
But I'm saying,
but even then,
dude. So if that were the case, wouldn't you think transgender people would just go out and fucking buy all the Impossible shit, and not have to buy their horn? It's so absurd.
You'd have to eat like an Impossible cow worth of Impossible
it's not
meat
possible.
all at once
and
to get
these
your
are,
dosaging in time. It's like it won't even work. It's like so far fetched that like
that they should never have even made that suggestion that it's even like a comparable thing. Because it's like, if that were the case, then all these people who want to transition would just go out and buy Impossible burgers.
But that's not what's happening. That's why it's so funny, is that we live in this like information-rich state where most of the information is still out of reach of people who can find it. Mm-hmm. Just because someone found estrogen of some type in some product. Some part of the media immediately jumps to man boobs. Yeah. And it completely undermines the whole purpose of it all. When, I'm pretty sure that when the chemical, the compound for Impossible Burger was filed, the patent was filed, they included a line that described how much estrogen is in it. Mm-hmm. There's probably there's probably a whole subsection of the patent filing that describes exactly what comprises on every level, because this is a regulated product. Food and Drug Administration, they might as well just call it chemical regulation. Mm-hmm. But these are known quantities, and so it's always interesting to me in the way that people are ready to jump on anything if they even think that it's it's not a weakness, if it's just something they think they can jump on and think they can capitalize on in the moment. Yeah. And sometimes it's estrogen in vegetable burgers. Yeah. Sometimes it's the unique talent of youth. And that's a whole different topic, but then it pisses me off a lot when I see like young people being taken advantage of for their talents. But so much of our society's entertainment is based on that.
And I don't think that can last much longer in this form, just because, as you're saying, it's it's just ripe for taking advantage of young people, but at the same time, it's taking advantage of talent, because then you realize the people who have the talents aren't the one who are getting the returns.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, what does this person deserve for introducing me to this talent? You know, it's like, oh, they get 90% because they found the talent, and the talent gets 10%. And most of the time, these completely imbalanced, deals are being made where, okay, so
the guy that did all those boy bands back in the
right,
90s.
yeah. I mean, not just him.
Well, there were a bunch of dudes
but
like
even,
that. But
even like Britney Spears, if Britney Spears released the album, she had to pay back returns for the first year. They didn't pay her for the album for the first year. It was like anybody who was being marketed had pretty much that same deal.
Yeah.
And it's like, even if they're a big name, if they're early in their career, chances are they're not even getting paid for the album for the first year, because they have to fucking pay for all the returns and shit.
Yeah, all the
because
studio time, all the advances.
And
because they have to finance
this big facade as if they're getting the benefit, but they're just the fucking workhorse and the mule, and they're doing all the work.
Well, they get to back in those days, the mythology was that the studio was putting them up in some fancy house up in the hills that was close to the studio, so they could focus on making the music. But as time has passed and technology has become more widely accessible and more financially accessible, it's no longer prohibitively expensive to record. I've been finding more and more new music. You know, I found this one channel on YouTube called No Copyright Sounds, and some of it was interesting, some of it wasn't my taste, but what I liked about it was that I felt like I was hearing people who grew up with pop music and know how to make like pop music. All of a sudden they discovered electronic music and realized that their keyboard also has a synthesizer built into it. And so now they're making pop music with like virtually all synthetic sounds. And so some of it's really cool, because these are people who start from a compositional background instead of a sound design background. And they're just making music. And so some of it is very formulaic. Some of it's pretty much like, bro step, full on, full effect. And some of it's like this really, intense EDM pulse. And occasionally some of these songs have approached like really, serious electronic music, what I would consider to be really serious electronic music. But the thing that united them all is they all sounded really good. They just sounded good. And they sounded fun. Like, I found this weird channel that has fun music on it. And some of it's okay. Some of it's not okay. But that hasn't happened to me in a while. It was kind of nice. YouTube finally like gave me a good suggestion.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, that's the struggle for those artists too, is breaking through the fucking noise.
Yeah.
There's just so much content out there now.
Yeah, we gotta trust people to curate these collections on some level. And it's kind of weird. Like, I know there are channels that are devoted entirely to one genre of drum and bass, and that's all they do. But at the same time, I like that, because I know if I want to hear some new neuro, like, there's some spots that I can go and just have my head warped. And then if I want something a little bit smoother, it's really easy to find something that has soaring melodies and lots of atmosphere. Or if I need something that's just all fucking mind-bendy, like square pusher-y stuff, there are entire channels just for that too. There are times when I'm really impressed by YouTube. I think that's why it's become my primary conduit for entertainment when I'm looking for that kind of thing.
Well, and you also get the visual element with it in a lot of cases where, I'll listen to podcasts, but there's a visual element to it that sometimes I'll passively consume. And when there's only the audio option, I think that in 2020 that feels there's something missing to a lot of people. So I do think that YouTube has sort of transcended newspapers or cable television, in that the focus on the user on the algorithm side creates an experience that's going to give you new things that are to your liking, but also keep prodding you to engage with new things. So that's kind of where I think it feels a lot more active in your curation of like flipping the remote channel on the television feels way more passive than thumbs downing some content on YouTube. They don't, if you're watching CNN on cable, they can't really tell if you flip the channel. That's not how the Nielsen shit works.
Yeah. Nielsen is like self-reported.
It is, but they also have boxes.
So not everyone is even part of the Nielsen sample.
Yeah, exactly. So even though if you're using a DVR or a cable box, they could technically
should be able to check your...
But they don't. It doesn't count. And that's, I think a lot of people assume that they count, but they actually don't. Unless you've gotten a Nielsen request in the mail, or unless you have a cable box that is specifically reporting to them, you're not counting.
Wow.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that. Just because of the way it's presented, it makes it seem like it does.
Yeah.
And radio, too. Radio doesn't count either.
Yeah. Well, I know that radio is a very specific sample. Mm-hmm. There are people that it's basically like their job is to listen to the radio.
Yep.
That's a pretty dope job. Maybe. If you're in the wrong market, that's
maybe.
That could be terrifying.
Yeah. But...
I think that's the challenge of any type of consumable media, is that you're always going to be faced with, the challenge of how do I find the right market? Where am I? Mm-hmm. I think that's what the beauty of the internet, though, is that the whole world is the market.
Yeah.
And as we've realized, there's always this objective of dealing with the competition, but I think really the competition is getting through all of the noise. I'm not saying that everyone else is creating noise. I'm just saying that there's enough going on that there is like background noise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's where I think it's difficult to know if you're making content for a specific audience or if you're making content that's meant to attract an audience. And that's kind of where, if you're making it to attract an audience, the audience hasn't been defined, and you are defining the audience by your content. So that's where somebody like Joe Rogan, for example, when he was doing Fear Factor...
We love Joe Rogan, by the way.
When he's doing, I guess he still technically does UFC commentary. He's going after specific audiences versus his podcast is creating the audience. And now there's like a specific podcast type bro that has become a thing because of his show, as his audience like finds each other. It's just weird. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he had a forum early on in his podcast, but
isn't creating community like part of the goal of this whole medium?
Yeah, I'm assuming for many people, but it's not always the case, because then you look at somebody like Bill Burr, and this is very much a one-way. His podcasts are almost him solo a lot of times. I don't even know if I've heard of him do a podcast of his own that's got guests, and it's it's just a one-way. He's not going on the forums interacting with his fans, shit like that. I think Doug Stanhope did. There's definitely different levels of interaction that you'll get from these people to try to retain their audience and base. Because I don't. If Joe Rogan had not been posting on his forum when he was, I don't think he'd have the base that he does now. Because people are he was so accessible.
Yeah, well, he succeeded in creating, a cult of personality. And the guy's funny. He's got an incredible career. He's a stand-up comedian, fighter, talk show, does TV. Has he been in a movie yet?
Yeah, he was in.
He's been in a movie.
The Zookeeper, I think.
Yeah,
just like small bit part. But.
Sure, whatever. I mean, that's a multi-genre, multi-medium, creative right there. That's an impressive range of mediums to be actively involved in. Yeah. He's got a pretty good platform. If he can get guys like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Elon Musk on his show and to explain, whatever it is, and then also have Alex Jones to give his version, and like manage to present a platform where everyone is able to express ideas and actually like talk them out.
Yeah, I
think that's a good thing. That's a good model. He's got long shows too.
Well, and I had to stop listening to it just because I realized a lot of the people he brought on he brings on left and right wing people, but the right wing people that he brings on are so far right in a way that is like, I don't want to be part of his audience anymore because he's promoting. Because then he'll bring on black people that are coons basically, and like just say anti-black people shit. Like he had this Hotep Jesus on, and this dude, this dude Jesus. Who was like, he said he was a woman to break a deadlift record.
I remember reading about that crap.
Yeah, he just like brings on the worst representatives of black culture in that. I think he's actually married to a black woman, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like I don't think he's racist. But what I think
he's just a misogynist, and
well, that's 100% true. But what ends up happening is, I think because he's exposed to black culture via his partner, then he feels compelled to portray what he believes to be the best of black culture and prop it up even more, to then act as if he's like giving black people a platform, when in reality he's picking the worst parts of black culture, because these are the people that try to show out for white people to gain an audience, and those are like the worst parts of black culture. I can't stand not just me, those are the people that like hurt the black community the most, because they like will take white narratives and fucking repeat them just to get popular with white people, and then it ends up like they becoming mouthpieces for like Fox News and shit, like Diamond and Silk.
Yeah, I think there was an Asian journalist got beat up in Portland because he was essentially reporting right-wing propaganda. And then so everyone's like complaining that what amounts to a right-wing journalist got beat up because he was Asian.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like Andy...
something.
Like, Win or something, I don't know.
I don't remember his last name, and I don't even care. Like, I mean, I get that journalists want to be first to break the story, but there's some places that it just seems like it's an odd decision.
Yeah. But then it's like, okay, everybody's not a monolith. We have to allow black people and Asians to have right-wing ideologies, of course. So that's not what we're not saying that all black or non-white people have to be left-wing. It's more so when they're right-wing, they don't have to be shitting on their own to get in good with white people.
I think that's called being a race traitor.
It is, yeah.
And
I mean, we call it coon in black culture just because it's like, you know, it's a reappropriation of the word raccoon, and like in that white people used to call black people coons, but when you have black people who are gonna fucking turn on our own, we're gonna say, hey, yeah, you want to go be with Massa? We're gonna call you coon too, and it's more so one of those things where it's like when black people will turn on their own openly and in a way where it's like so obvious that they're just trying to like get white people to like them, because there's nothing wrong with, like, obviously there's nothing wrong with being friends with white people or being in good with white people. I'm talking specifically about when people throw their own under the bus and they're not white to get in good with white people, because that's a thing, and that's where it's like, man, those are the fucking saddest people on the planet.
No one likes the bus underthrower.
No, because that's like,
that's
again,
just a shitty person.
Yeah,
that's the bag of dicks Santa. Yeah, all they do is deliver dicks.
That's the person who, when on the fucking the plantation, when there was people planning their escape, that's the one that went in the house and said, hey, Massa, they're planning a revolt, they're planning to escape, you might want to go down there, see about them people in the slave house, because they're gonna run tonight, Massa. And those are the people that are now on Fox News fucking talking about statistics and like what's wrong with the black community, but they're directing it at Fox News. And like,
there was a Mario Van Peebles movie, I think it was Melvin Van Peebles movie, starring Mario Van Peebles movie called Posse.
Oh yeah.
And they explored the concept of Motisa. I remember hearing that, it's like, what the hell did he just say? And then of course they explain it.
Yeah.
And I think that's in line with what you're describing.
Yep. I remember seeing that when I was a kid.
I really enjoyed that movie. I actually really enjoyed Melvin Van Peebles movies. No matter, even though there were some of them were pretty bad, Mario Van Peebles movies, some of them were terrible. Solo, they did a terrible job of adapting. Their adaptation of Solo was just horrible. For the longest time, it was the worst movie I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
But Solo isn't really a good comic. Solo is like the military's version of the Punisher, basically. Yeah. And so, I don't know. That's tough, because I'd only just started reading comics, and so I'd read, whatever was on the shelves, and so I'd read a few episodes of Solo, and it was fine. And it wasn't actually until I was like a young adult that I realized that comic was not for kids, that I had no business looking at it, because it was like, it was way too technical of a version of Punisher. There was way too heavy of an element of the military, and the dude can teleport. They didn't even have that in the Mario Van Peebles movie. Can't have a Solo that doesn't teleport.
Yeah, it's amazing what would pass for action flicks in the 80s, because, I mean, Punisher, that film, it's so far from a comic book film, like the one with Dolph Lundgren.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not a horrible movie, but it's a horrible Punisher movie. And that's where, man, the things, Running Man, they love fucking spandex in the 80s. So you want action? Put them in spandex. American Gladiators.
That's how you know. Man, American Gladiators. That show. I used to love that show.
Yeah, everybody did. Because there's so much spandex.
There's so much spandex. It's true. And they fired tennis balls at people and would hit them in the face, and they practically get knocked out.
Fucking heavy duty Nerf guns.
Yeah. They would get out those giant Q-tips and waylay each other. Mm-hmm. They played the most awesomest version of King of the Hill.
But the whole time, none of us kids realize these people are so jacked out of their mind on steroids that the fucking normal people that they're going against are like a third of their size. We're like, why is Nitro's huge, man?
Nitro's like, feeble human, I will destroy you. And then the feeble human's like,
Oh
what
my
the
god, they were so jacked out of their mind.
yeah.
But yeah, kids like, oh yeah, they're taking vitamins and saying their prayers.
Vitamins and prayer. You know who else makes people take vitamins, right? Fucking Scientologists. I know, seriously. There have been numerous cases where family turns Scientologist, and then they take their kid off of his antipsychotics, and then the kid like stabs the parents like 100 times. Seriously, kills them, like murders and mutilates them, type shit. And it's because the Scientologist like, oh, just give him these vitamins, it will take care of him. It's like, no, you don't understand. He's got a severe like structural deformity and a chemical imbalance in his brain. And we know this because we know that people who suffer from these kinds of things have these conditions.
Yeah.
And so, can't trust Scientologists.
Who did? I don't I didn't realize that was still a thing. I thought
I think that they're they've got all those
Anonymous
documentaries
took care
now.
of him.
Did they?
I mean, that's what I thought for the
I
most
hope
part. I'd love to see their numbers of new Scientology recruits or whatever. There can't be.
Oh no. See, my take on Scientology at this point is having survived the public relations nightmare that they experienced. The only people they can get, and this is like this is where vampires go to die. But the only people they can get are like at the end of the line, nothing left, indigent, homeless people. They pick them up and they ship them off to their Scientology ranch, reform them, reprogram, depattern them basically, and then send them back out to sell Dianetics books on the street in whatever city that they can get them. And then they also have to go get a job while they also pay back into Scientology. It's the end of it.
Yeah, it's got to be, because I'm looking at it like Katie Holmes went from Tom Cruise to Jamie Foxx and making movies with Queen Latifah and shit. So that's where I'm, it makes it look so much like a brainwashing bubble that somebody broke out of finally. That's where I'm like, I can't imagine anybody.
She had to get as far away from that nonsense as she possibly could.
Jumping on the couch shit. That was like the pinnacle when Jerry O'Connell was making fun of it and everybody was laughing at Tom Cruise. Because, I mean, Tom Cruise isn't synonymous with Scientology.
He's just a very prominent
figure, because I think he survived it, but
yeah.
John Travolta kind of didn't, in that his career is fine, but then you start, like, I don't even know if his career is necessarily fine. He's seen as a creeper now, and that's why he made that last creepy-ass movie that fucking flopped, because it's like, all that shit came out with him, being a weirdo with his masseuse and all that shit.
Wow, I don't know anything about any of this.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, go look. It's like, well, this is way before the Me Too stuff, but it was all this weird shit comes out, but he tries to deny it because it was with a dude, and tries to be like, oh no, I'm not gay, and basically shitting on gay people in the process, instead of, clearly he didn't go to jail, so it wasn't any criminal. I mean, any criminal activity that had proof enough to put him in jail. Is more so the people that he was working with started calling him creeper, and then before, like I said, before Me Too, it just kind of ruined his career for a bit, where he's like, now he's playing creeper roles, like that's what he's relegated to.
Well, he's been typecast. He's always been typecast.
Yeah,
he's never been able to like really portray a character that wasn't some extension of the public persona of John Travolta. He's always got to be that cool guy. I don't think I've ever seen a movie where he wasn't. I'm sure there's a movie where he like has a breakdown, but
yeah, and
I can't think of anything.
But that's part of it where it's funny now how much we're in a time where it like made him look bad to try to disconnect himself from gay people, in that because his idea of when he grew up is like, oh no, we got to put that in the closet, instead of like just admitting it. It makes him look bad because he's out of touch with modernity because of the closet he was forced into in the first place. It's this weird. I'm assuming it's the same shit with Tom Cruise. It's more so, like, these people almost had their careers ruined for things that now they would be embraced for. In that now, but they can't fathom it. So it's like they're still trying to pretend that they are the people that
they were.
Yeah. I mean, like Charlie Sheen is a great example. When that facade came off, and everybody's like, yeah, he's like
freaky deaky.
Yeah, fucking
shit.
He'll not disclose his AIDS status and then have unprotected sex with a prostitute, and then take that prostitute to fucking Thanksgiving dinner, and then call his fucking wife a nigger. Like, like,
but isn't he still on television?
Yes, because he fucking owned it. That's what I'm getting at. When Charlie Sheen, when all that facade came off and all this shit was like, Charlie Sheen, they're trying to make him out to be the worst person possible. But it
was like the opposite. Like, he became like a god among men.
Exactly. So that's where
he became like the next generation Hugh Hefner,
because he owned it, and that's what I think a lot of people did not understand.
Not quite Hugh Hefner, but you know,
about
on a similar
what
level
happened.
Of crazy shit.
Because it was like that shit was designed to ruin his career.
Yeah,
he left 2.5 Men, like when that shit was happening, and it was like his career should have been completely destroyed, except for the fact that he was like, yeah, guess what? Yeah, I bang prostitutes. And everybody's, okay, what can we do now?
And didn't he? I think there was also something about like him and chicks with dicks.
Yeah. Exactly.
He's like really into, he's like into a really broad range of...
They were trying to use that shit to fucking destroy him, and instead of that, he was just like, yeah, so what?
I think that he's the reason that we have this, the idiom, or the phrase, far be it from me to judge another man's sexual proclivities, or something like that. Man.
But yeah, that's the type of shit that would ruin a person.
I thought he was always supposed to be some kind of bad boy. Badass or something like that, or wasn't he on like Young Guns or something?
That was his brother, right?
Oh,
Emilio, I thought.
Okay,
yeah, because Emilio, definitely I think had the more serious. Well, no, because Charlie was like, he was serious in his early days, but I think what ended up happening was his exploits in Hollywood got him relegated to more ridiculous parts, like Hot Shots Part 2. So when Hollywood's trying to throw him under the bus, and then I think he became an accidental success again with 2.5 Men, because then he fell out with the producer of the show. I forget the dude's name. But he's a big producer, and then once the producer decided, Chuck Lorre. Once Chuck Lorre decided he didn't like Charlie Sheen, they were basically, I don't know if it was at Chuck Lorre. I don't know if Chuck Lorre is that powerful, and I don't know if he has that much clout. But if it became a thing where once Chuck Lorre decided he was off, then that barrage came at him, and that's like crazy. But the way that Chuck Lorre's myth exists, he potentially could have that kind of clout. So, I wouldn't put it past, because Chuck Lorre does those vanity cards after Big Bang Theory, and I would read those vanity cards all the time, and he would like, I mean, they're online, but he would put a lot of dirty laundry in those things in a way where it's like, it may be a joke, but it may just actually be him airing his dirty laundry in his vanity cards, and the fact that he called them vanity cards made it seem even more like this dude is that narcissistic to be like, yeah, I'm gonna put all my dirty laundry at the end of a show over and over. Because I don't know if you ever saw like, did you ever watch Big Bang Theory?
Oh, I love that show.
Like, did you ever look at the vanity cards?
What are those? The ones at the end of the show?
Yeah, they're only on the scene. They're only on the screen for like half a second. So if you actually want to read it, you either pause it or you go online and look at the vanity cards. And that's where I would always pause it and read them. But then there was like, I think it was like season 3 or 4. Then that's when they started getting really weird. Like, is he really writing this shit in a fucking vanity card? Like, because he would be talking about people, but not in a direct manner. So, you know, that's again, I don't know how much power Chuck Lorre has, but it's very possible that he's, you know, that faceless power that is the you know.
So it's our station manager's, our former station manager's birthday, and we're gonna give him a call and wish him happy birthday.
Yo.
Mike, you're on the air.
Hey, what up?
Happy birthday, man.
Thanks, I appreciate it. How are you going? Man, I was really getting into your show. I could never be on your show because I would just start talking shit, like, about everybody you talk about.
Well, you're on now.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, man.
Now, I fucking hate Tom Cruise. Like, I hated him before all that shit came out about him. I never trusted him. I knew he was funny. I knew he was phony. I was always more of a Brad Pitt fan, but I always thought Tom Cruise was a hack. Like, straight up douchebag. Like, you know, I'm a big vampire guy. So, like, check it out. Like,
Interview
the only
with the
movie
Vampire.
Tom Cruise... Yeah, that's the only movie he was good in, and that's because Lestat was a fucking prick. So they got King Prick to fucking play Lestat. And most people, you know, he's got all the sex appeal and stuff in that movie. And I remember, like, the women back then being all about it, you know, all these vampire posers and shit, you know. And I had, like, read Lestat, and I was like, if you people knew what a douchebag Lestat was, he was, like, y'all would not want anything to do with this motherfucker. He is like the epitome of manipulative, misogynist through and through. which is why he has to entrap people. Like, he's a lonely, miserable prick worth of a person, and he has to entrap people when he makes them vampires, and then after a while they're like, fuck you, you're a dick. And so finally some bitch came along and killed him. That's what happened.
Interviewing with a vampire in 30 seconds.
Pretty much.
That was a pretty succinct synopsis.
Yeah, no doubt. But anyways, I appreciate the call, guys. Like, great fucking show. I enjoy listening to you guys every Sunday.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate
that's
it.
What's up? Yeah, you got any questions? You got any other tidbits you want to hear me pop off about before I get off here?
What is it? Edge of Tomorrow?
World of Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one where it's like live, die, repeat.
Oh, that movie was fun though.
Yeah, I thought that
was completely off my radar.
That's if you haven't, like, I'll say that's a good movie with Tom Cruise in it, in that I think the movie would have worked with anybody else because the plot's good, but that's one where him in it is not. It's like,
it doesn't matter if it has Tom Cruise. The story was compelling. The visuals were solid. The story was complex enough that you wanted to see the end of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody else told me about that when I hadn't heard about it until it was like years after it came out, and I saw it. I was like, oh, this is a fucking good flick.
Like, how did this make it through the
Yeah.
How did this not make it through my filters? It's a sci-fi movie.
But I think it's because most people just got lost on him, so it probably didn't do well at first.
I think he also made that movie Oblivion, which was not well received.
Wasn't there Elysium too?
Elysium was the Matt Damon.
Oh, I'm not racist for that.
No.
Okay.
No.
See, y'all were talking about I don't watch TV. I get onto Netflix. Like
We watch movies.
this, that, and the other. Yeah. Well, see, I don't even watch a lot of movies. Like in the last decade and a half, like I'm still watching. If I watch a movie, I'm gonna watch The Matrix again, or like I'm gonna watch something that I like.
That's
in
in
the
our
90s.
like top 5 recommendations.
Yeah.
Every time someone's like, "Hey, what should I watch?" It's like you should probably rewatch all of the Matrix
You need
movies.
to watch The Matrix. Yeah, pretty much. If you haven't watched it, what the fuck's wrong with you? You gotta go watch it right now. I've had people over the house, like, it just comes up randomly, like, oh, I never seen that. Oh, well, you're watching it right now, sir. It's been here a while.
That's like the perfect way to experience the Matrix, not realizing that you're watching it, and then all the questions start happening.
Yeah, and I literally got to tell them, shut up, you'll see. Just watch the fucking movie.
Well, happy birthday, Mike. Thanks for picking
Happy
up,
birthday.
man. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to have to come out there and be on your show one day.
Absolutely.
Word.
You
All
take
right,
care, man.
Thanks a lot. I'll talk to you guys soon. Hey, we gonna play some drum and bass?
Absolutely.
Are you playing first?
Yeah, we're actually gonna play bass track, so let people hear that.
Sweet.
Get it started off right. So
That's what I'm talking about. I'm glad you're a part of the team, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
awesome, man. You take care. Happy birthday.
Later, dude. Stay.
Yeah, and there you have it.
Happy birthday, you old. Ha ha ha.
And one more time, I want to play that Johnny Hassel track. And next thing you'll hear will be some drum and bass.